3 years after swearing off dating, Vivian Carter sat in a dimly lit wine bar, her scarf wrapped carefully across half her burned face. William Hayes arrived 20 minutes late, apologizing profusely because his babysitter had canceled last minute, forcing him to bring his 7-year-old daughter Audrey along. When the little girl innocently asked, "Does it hurt?" Vivian went pale and shot to her feet. "Don't look." "I'm disgusting," she choked out, then bolted into the street. William chased after her, catching her under the neon lights right outside the bar, and kissed her scar. Vivian Carter had once been the kind of woman who painted the world in bold colors. At 23, she had been studying art at the community college, specializing in portrait work, convinced that beauty was her native language. She loved sketching faces in coffee shops, capturing the play of light across cheekbones, the stories hidden in smile lines, the way shadows fell across a jawline. Her professors praised her technical skill, but what they loved most was her fearlessness. She drew homeless men sleeping on benches. She drew wrinkled grandmothers waiting for buses. She drew beauty in places other people looked away from. She had been outgoing, confident, the kind of person who made friends in grocery store lines. Her mother used to joke that Vivian could talk to a brick wall and make it laugh. She wore bright lipstick. She sang off-key in the shower. She believed, with absolute certainty, that she knew who she was. Then came the fire. The apartment building where she lived with her mother was a 6-story walk-up in a neighborhood where landlords cut corners and tenants had no leverage. The wiring was original to the building's construction in 1972. Maintenance complaints, piled up in the management office, routinely ignored or dismissed with vague promises. Tenants had been reporting flickering lights, tripped breakers, and burning smells for months. Nothing was done. The fire broke out at 2:14 in the morning on a Tuesday in February. Vivian woke to the acrid smell of smoke and her mother shaking her shoulder. They made it into the hallway, joining the stream of panicked residents fleeing toward the stairwell. Vivian was halfway down the second-floor landing when she realized her mother was not beside her anymore. She turned back, shoving against the tide of people rushing past her. The hallway on the 3rd floor was a tunnel of black smoke and blistering heat that seared her lungs with every breath. She found her mother collapsed 20 feet from their apartment door, overcome by smoke inhalation. Vivian grabbed her mother's arms and tried to drag her toward the stairs, but the ceiling groaned. A support beam gave way, crashing down in a shower of sparks and burning drywall. Vivian threw herself over her mother's body, trying to shield her from the falling debris. She felt the searing, unbearable agony as flames licked across her face, her neck, her shoulder. The pain was so intense she could not even scream. Her skin bubbled and split. The smell of her own burning flesh filled her nostrils. When the firefighters finally reached them, pulling Vivian off her mother's body, Vivian's mother was already gone. Carbon monoxide poisoning, the medical examiner would later determine. She had likely been unconscious before Vivian even found her. Vivian survived with 3rd-degree burns across her right cheek, neck, and shoulder, and down her arm to her elbow. The scars were raised, textured, a mottled landscape of red and white tissue that pulled tight when she moved. They marked her face like a map of her failure, a permanent reminder that she had not been fast enough, strong enough, brave enough to save the person she loved most. After 6 weeks in the burn unit and another 4 months of painful skin grafts and physical therapy, Vivian withdrew from the world. She quit art school 2 weeks before finals. She stopped painting entirely, unable to look at faces without seeing all the ways hers had been destroyed. She took a job in the back office of a print shop, a position that required almost no customer interaction. She arrived early, left late, and ate lunch at her desk with her back to the door. She built what she privately called her armor, oversized scarves in dark colors that could be wrapped high around her neck and pulled across her lower face. Long hair, always styled to fall across the damaged side of her face in a heavy curtain. Sunglasses, even indoors, even on cloudy days. She learned to map her city by the routes that avoided the most foot traffic, the stores that were quietest at odd hours, the restaurants with corner booths where she could sit with her scarred side to the wall. She shopped for groceries at 11 at night when the aisles were nearly empty. She ordered takeout instead of eating in restaurants. She crossed the street when she saw groups of teenagers approaching, knowing from experience that they would whisper and point and laugh. She deleted all her social media accounts after the first dozen messages from old classmates offering thoughts and prayers that felt more like voyeurism than sympathy. The stares were the worst part. The brief flicker of shock when someone's eyes landed on her face, quickly replaced by pity or, worse, disgust. The way people's gazes would skip off her like a stone off water, unable to land, unable to hold contact. Children pointed with the blunt honesty of the young. Teenagers whispered behind their hands, their eyes bright with cruel fascination. Adults pretended not to notice while their entire bodies betrayed them, turning away, creating distance, sending the unmistakable message, "You do not belong here." Vivian learned to recognize every variation of discomfort and rejection. The too bright smile of forced politeness, the careful way people angled their bodies to avoid looking directly at her, the way conversations died when she entered a room. She began to believe what she saw reflected in their faces, that she was grotesque, that she was a burden, that she had no right to take up space in a world that valued beauty above all else. She began to believe that the fire had not just scarred her body, it had erased her right to exist as a full person. Her best friend, Bonnie, had been there since the burn unit, refusing to let Vivian disappear entirely. Bonnie was a nurse who had treated Vivian during those first agonizing weeks, the one person who had seen Vivian at her absolute worst and had not looked away. She had held Vivian's hand during debridements, the excruciating process of removing dead tissue from the burns. She had sat with her through the screaming nightmares. She had been there the first time. Vivian looked in a mirror and saw what she had become. Bonnie knew that Vivian was drowning. She watched her friend shrink smaller and smaller until she barely existed outside the four walls of her apartment and the back room of the print shop. So, Bonnie pushed. She was the one who found Serafina Chen, a therapist who specialized in trauma survivors and who had herself survived a car accident that left her with visible scars on her hands and arms. Serafina did not offer Vivian pity. She offered her work. Hard, painful work. She gave Vivian homework. One proactive social interaction per week, something Vivian chose rather than something forced upon her. Go to a coffee shop and order at the counter instead of using the app. Make small talk with a cashier. Attend a community event, even just for 10 minutes. When Bonnie suggested a blind date 6 months into therapy, Vivian had laughed bitterly, a harsh sound that held no humor. "You want me to inflict this on some poor stranger? That is cruel." But Bonnie was relentless, and Serafina backed her up. "You cannot heal in hiding," Serafina had said during one session, her scarred hands folded calmly on her desk. "You are allowed to want connection. You are allowed to try. And you are allowed to fail. But you have to try." So Vivian agreed. Just once. Just to prove to herself that she could not do it, that normal life, the life she had before, was no longer available to her. She would go on one date, endure 1 hour of rejection, and then she could close that door forever with a clear conscience. William Hayes was 38 years old, a maintenance technician at Riverside Regional Medical Center where he worked on electrical systems, fire suppression equipment, HVAC systems, and building infrastructure. He was good at his job because he understood how systems failed, how small acts of negligence could cascade into catastrophe, how what seemed like a minor shortcut could kill someone 6 months down the line. He had learned that lesson 5 years ago when his wife Laura died in a car accident on Interstate 40, hit by a drunk driver who walked away without a scratch. William had been the one to identify her body in the ICU. He had sat beside her hospital bed as machines breathed for her, as monitors beeped their sterile rhythm, as doctors delivered updates in carefully neutral tones that could not hide the truth. He had memorized every bruise and cut on her face, every tube and wire, every beep and hiss. He had held her hand, still warm despite everything, and told her it was okay to let go. And when the machines were finally turned off, he had stayed until her hand went cold. Beauty, he learned then, was the least important thing about a person. Laura had been beautiful, objectively, undeniably. But that was not why he had loved her. He had loved her because she laughed at his terrible jokes, because she sang in the car with the windows down, because she was kind to strangers and fierce with people she loved, because she made him want to be better. And none of that had anything to do with the arrangement of her features or the smoothness of her skin. After Laura's death, William poured himself into raising their daughter Audrey. He became disciplined, quiet, predictable. He followed a strict routine. Wake at 6, make breakfast, drop Audrey at school, work his shift, pick her up, help with homework, make dinner, bedtime stories, sleep. He did not date. He did not take risks. He did not let himself want anything beyond keeping his daughter safe and fed and loved. And for 5 years, that felt like enough. It felt like all he deserved. Audrey was 7 now, bright and curious and relentlessly honest. With her mother's sharp observation skills and her father's refusal to pretend things were fine when they were not, she asked questions that made adults squirm. She pointed out inconsistencies in fairy tales. She called out liars with the casual brutality of someone too young to understand social niceties. William loved that about her, even when it made life complicated, even when teachers called him in for conferences about Audrey's inappropriate directness. William's younger sister Gwen worked as a nurse in the pediatric wing at Riverside Regional. She had watched her brother shrink his life down to duty and routine, had watched him turn himself into a ghost, and she hated it. She hated seeing him go through the motions, hated seeing him refuse every invitation, every possibility, every chance at something more than mere survival. So, without asking permission, Gwen created a dating profile for William on an app she thought seemed reputable. She used a photo from Audrey's last birthday party, one where William was actually smiling, caught mid-laugh at something Audrey had said. She wrote a bio that was honest. Widower, single father, works in healthcare maintenance, enjoys hiking and reading history books, looking for someone patient and kind. When William found out, he was furious. He showed up at Gwen's apartment, waving his phone, his face tight with anger. "You had no right. Delete it. Now." But Gwen did not back down. She stood in her doorway, arms crossed, and met her brother's glare with one of her own. "You are allowed to be happy, William. You are allowed to live. Laura would be furious if she could see what you have done to yourself. Do not," William said, his voice low and dangerous, "talk about Laura." "Someone has to," Gwen shot back. "Because you won't. You have turned yourself into a monument to grief, and it is killing you. And worse, Audrey sees it. She sees you going through life like you are just waiting for it to be over. Is that what you want to teach her? That love means giving up?" William had left without another word. But he did not delete the profile. And when Gwen called 3 days later to say she had a potential match, someone she knew through a community support group, someone who understood loss and fear and starting over, William found himself saying yes, not because he wanted to, but because maybe, just maybe, Gwen was right. Maybe Audrey deserved a father who was more than just functional. Bonnie and Gwen knew each other through a community support group. When Bonnie mentioned Vivian's situation, Gwen immediately thought of William. They arranged the introduction carefully. A quiet wine bar with soft lighting, a corner table, low pressure. Neither Vivian nor William knew they were both going into this date with armor on. Vivian hid her scars. William hid the fact that he had a daughter, afraid of being rejected before he even started. On the night of the date, Vivian arrived 15 minutes early. She scoped out the bar, chose a table with her back to the crowd, positioned herself so her damaged side faced the wall. She practiced safe conversation topics in her head. She planned her exit routes. She reminded herself she only had to survive 1 hour. William had every intention of being on time. But at 6:15, his regular babysitter called to say she had the flu and could not come. William stood in his kitchen, staring at his phone, weighing his options. He could cancel. It would be the easiest thing in the world to send a quick apology text and retreat back into his controlled, predictable life. But Gwen's voice echoed in his head. Don't run. A sincere apology is better than ghosting. So William made a choice. He called Vivian, explained the situation, and asked if he could bring Audrey along. On the other end of the line, Vivian froze. A child. Her worst nightmare. Children were unfiltered mirrors. They said exactly what they saw, but she had already committed. She had already told Bonnie and Serafina she would try, so she said yes. William arrived 20 minutes late, holding Audrey's hand. He spotted Vivian at the corner table, her posture rigid, her scarf arranged just so. He approached carefully, already apologizing. I am so sorry. My sitter canceled, and I did not want to just disappear without explaining. Vivian nodded stiffly, barely meeting his eyes. William gestured to a chair, and Audrey climbed into it, swinging her legs. She looked at Vivian with open curiosity, the way children do, taking in the scarf, the careful positioning, the tension radiating from this stranger. Then Audrey asked the question that detonated everything. Does it hurt? Not mean, not cruel, just honest. Vivian's entire body went cold. Her hand flew to her scarf, pulling it higher. She felt the weight of every stare she had ever endured, crashing down on her all at once. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. Her vision narrowed. She stood so abruptly, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Don't look, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm disgusting. Then she ran. A few patrons turned to watch. Someone pulled out their phone. William was caught between his daughter and the woman fleeing into the night. He made a split-second decision. He flagged down the bartender, a woman named Claire who knew Gwen. Can you watch her for 3 minutes? He asked, his voice tight with urgency. Stay with Miss Claire, I will be right back. Then he ran after Vivian. She was fast, fueled by shame and panic. She pushed through the front door and into the street, the cold air hitting her like a slap. Her scarf slipped loose. She stumbled on the wet pavement, her vision blurred with tears. She did not know where she was going, only that she needed to be anywhere but there. William caught up to her half a block away, near a closed bookstore. He did not call out. He did not want to humiliate her further. He just stayed close, matching her pace, keeping her in sight. Vivian turned into a narrow alley, pressing her back against the brick wall. She was shaking, gasping for air, her hands covering her face. Just go, she said. You'll be scared too. Everyone is. William stopped a few feet away, his hands visible, non-threatening. I am not scared, he said quietly. Vivian shook her head, her voice rising. She bent forward, her breath coming too fast, the edges of a panic attack closing in. William saw her knees buckle. He moved quickly, stepping behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders before she could collapse. He did not grab. He did not trap. He anchored. He held her steady, his chest against her back, his voice low and calm in her ear. I am here, he said. You don't have to look at anyone. Just breathe. Vivian's body was rigid, braced for rejection. But William did not let go. He did not flinch. He just held her, letting her weight rest against him, waiting for her breathing to slow. Slowly, incrementally, her shaking eased. William gently took her wrist and guided her hand down from her face. Vivian turned her head away instinctively, but William did not force it. He just waited. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were wet and red and full of shame. William met her gaze. Then he leaned forward and pressed a soft, deliberate kiss to the scarred skin on her cheek. It was not theatrical. It was not a grand gesture. It was a statement. "I see you. I am not afraid." Vivian went completely still. No one had touched her scars like that. No one had chosen to. William pulled back, his expression steady. "I should get back to Audrey," he said. "But I meant what I said. I am not scared." He walked back to the bar. Audrey ran to him the moment he stepped inside, wrapping her arms around his leg. "Is she okay?" Audrey asked in a small voice. William knelt down to her level. "She was upset. But we did not leave her alone." Outside, in the shadows across the street, a stranger lowered their phone. The video was already uploading. Vivian returned home shaking. She locked the door, tore off her scarf, and stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. Her reflection was exactly what she expected. Monstrous, unlovable, wrong. She typed out a message to Bonnie. "Don't set up anything else. I can't do this." She was about to block William's number when her phone buzzed. A text from him. Short, no pressure. "I am sorry if tonight made you uncomfortable. Thank you for being brave enough to show up. You left this." Attached was a photo of her hair clip, still sitting on the table at the bar. "I can mail it, or Gwen can drop it off. No expectation of seeing you again. But I meant what I said earlier. I am not afraid." Vivian stared at the message for a long time. He had not said she was beautiful. He had not tried to fix her or comfort her with empty words. He had just told her the truth. And somehow, that was worse, because it made her want to believe him. The next day, Audrey drew a picture. It showed a woman with a lightning bolt across her face. At the bottom, in crooked letters, Audrey had written, "Lightning makes you strong." William took a photo of the drawing and sent it to Vivian with no caption. When Vivian saw it, she cried for the first time in months. Not because she was sad, because for the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at her scars and seen power instead of damage. She texted Bonnie. "Okay, one more try. But somewhere quiet, daytime, just talking." William agreed immediately. But before they could meet again, Vivian received a notification. Someone had tagged her in a post. She opened it and felt the floor drop out from under her. The video showed everything. Her standing abruptly at the table, her voice breaking as she said, "Don't look, I'm disgusting." Her running into the street. The caption read, "When the blind date goes wrong. Girl has meltdown over her face." The account belonged to a user called Hillary Morgan, a mid-tier influencer who specialized in viral drama content. The post already had thousands of views. The comments were brutal. "Yikes. I mean, I'd run too if I looked like that. Why even try to date? Feel bad for the guy." Vivian felt her chest tighten. Her hands went numb. She scrolled through comment after comment, each one confirming what she had always believed about herself. She was a spectacle, a cautionary tale, a punchline. Bonnie came over within the hour and found Vivian sitting on the floor of her apartment. Her phone smashed against the wall, her nails digging into her forearms. Bonnie gently pulled Vivian's hands away and wrapped her in a blanket. "We are going to fix this," Bonnie said, but Vivian shook her head. "There is nothing to fix. This is what I am." Meanwhile, William was dealing with his own fallout. "Your dad kissed a monster," one of them sneered. Audrey shoved the kid hard enough to make him stumble. The teacher intervened, and William got called in for a meeting. That night, William found Hillary's account and sent her a direct message. "Take the video down. You are hurting someone who did nothing to you." Hillary's response came within minutes. "It's public space, freedom of speech, and it's trending, so no." William felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He forwarded the exchange to Gwen, who forwarded it to Bonnie. They began strategizing. But before they could act, Vivian received another message. This one was from an anonymous account. It contained details about the night of the fire, the name of the apartment building, the exact time the blaze started, information that only someone connected to the case would know. The message ended with a single line: "Stop digging, or everyone will know what you really are." Vivian's blood ran cold. Someone was watching her. Someone knew her past, and they wanted her silent. She called William, her voice shaking. When he arrived, he brought Gwen and a man Vivian had never met. Henry Callahan, a fire marshal who had worked the case 3 years ago. Henry was in his 50s, graying at the temples, with the weary look of someone who had seen too many preventable tragedies. "I remember your building," Henry said, sitting across from Vivian in her small living room. "We flagged it. Multiple code violations. The owner kept dodging inspections, paying off the right people to look the other way." Vivian's hands clenched. "But the report said it was electrical failure." "An accident." Henry nodded slowly. "That is what the official report says. But the case got closed faster than it should have. There were inconsistencies, missing documentation. I pushed back, but I was overruled." William leaned forward. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "The smoke detectors on your floor were disabled," Henry said, looking at Vivian. "Not broken. Disabled. Someone bypassed the system. Your mother should have had warning. She didn't." The room went silent. Vivian felt something crack open inside her chest. For 3 years, she had carried the weight of her mother's death. She had believed it was her fault for not moving faster, for not being strong enough. But the system had failed them first. "Why are you telling me this now?" Vivian asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because someone is trying very hard to keep you quiet," Henry said. "And that tells me they have something to hide." The next day, William received a phone call. The voice on the other end was calm, polite, and menacing. "Your daughter goes to Riverside Elementary, doesn't she? It would be a shame if something happened to her." William's hand tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" The line went dead. He called the police immediately. A detective named Finn Graves took the case. Finn was young, methodical, and took threats against children very seriously. He started digging into the building's ownership records while William installed security cameras around his house and arranged for Audrey to stay with Gwen temporarily. Bonnie also received a warning. A car followed her home from work one night, circling her block 3 times before speeding off. She reported it, but the license plate was fake. Vivian felt the walls closing in. "This is my fault," she told William when they met at a coffee shop the next morning. "If I just stay quiet, they will leave you alone." William's jaw tightened. "No, if you stay quiet, they win, and they will do this to someone else." "But Audrey is safe," William interrupted. "And she deserves to grow up in a world where people do not get away with this." Vivian looked at him, this man she barely knew, who was risking everything to stand beside her. "Why are you doing this?" William met her eyes. "Because it is right. And because you matter." It was Serafina who suggested the next step. She was hosting a fundraiser for burn survivors, a small community event at a local hall. She asked Vivian if she would consider speaking. Vivian laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Yes," Serafina agreed. "But you will be the one with the microphone." Vivian spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with the decision. William did not push. He just sat with her, quiet and steady, letting her think. It was Audrey who tipped the scale. The little girl gave Vivian a new drawing. This one showed Vivian standing on a stage, her face turned toward the light. On the night of the event, Vivian stood backstage, her hands shaking. She wore a simple black dress and a thin scarf draped loosely around her shoulders, but not covering her face. For the first time in 3 years, she was not hiding. When Serafina introduced her, the room fell quiet. Vivian walked to the microphone, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes. She gripped the edges of the podium to keep her hands from trembling. 3 years ago, I survived a fire, she began, her voice unsteady. I lost my mother. I lost half my face. I lost the person I thought I was. She paused, looking out at the crowd. Some faces were sympathetic, some were curious. A few looked uncomfortable. For 3 years, I believed my scars made me disgusting. I believed I had no right to be seen. I believed the worst thing about me was how I looked. Her voice grew stronger. But the worst thing about me is not my face. The worst thing is that I let fear make me invisible. I let shame keep me silent while the people responsible for my mother's death walked free. She took a breath. I am done hiding. I am done apologizing for surviving. And I am asking you to stop turning pain into entertainment. She looked directly at the back of the room, where Hillary Morgan sat with her phone in hand. Hillary's face went pale. If you see someone suffering, do not film them. Do not mock them. Do not make their worst moment go viral for likes. Choose kindness. Choose decency. Choose to be better. The applause started slowly, then built. Vivian stepped back from the microphone, her legs weak, her heart pounding. But she had done it. She had spoken, and she had not run. After the event, several people approached her. Survivors, family members. A journalist named Marcus Reed who covered housing safety issues. Marcus asked if he could interview Vivian about the building fire. She agreed. The story ran 2 weeks later. Negligence and cover-up. How one woman's tragedy exposes systemic failure. It named names. It included Henry's suppressed findings. It detailed the building owner's pattern of code violations and bribery. The backlash was immediate. The building owner, a man named Gerald Rost, issued a statement denying all allegations. His lawyer threatened to sue, but Finn had been building a case, and when the story broke, 2 more families came forward with similar complaints. The district attorney opened an investigation. Vivian was subpoenaed to give a deposition. Andrea Lyles, a housing rights attorney, offered to represent her pro bono. Together, they walked Vivian through the process, explaining what to expect, how to stay calm, how to tell the truth without letting them twist her words. On the day of her deposition, William drove her to the courthouse. He waited outside the room, Audrey coloring quietly beside him. When Vivian emerged 3 hours later, exhausted and shaken, William stood and wrapped her in a steady embrace. "You did it," he said simply. The investigation took months. Gerald Rost was eventually charged with criminal negligence and bribery. He pleaded out, avoiding jail time but losing his properties and his business licenses. It was not the justice Vivian had wanted, but it was something. And it meant no one else would die because of his greed. Through it all, William was there. Not as a savior, not as a fixer, just as someone who stayed. One evening, after Audrey had gone to bed, William and Vivian sat on his porch, watching the sunset. Vivian had started painting again, small pieces at first, portraits of scarred faces rendered in bold, unflinching strokes. She called the series Scar Light. "I need to tell you something," William said, breaking the comfortable silence. Vivian looked at him. "When my wife was dying, I sat beside her in the ICU. She was covered in bruises. Her face was swollen. She did not look like herself. And I realized something. He paused. I did not love her because she was beautiful. I loved her because she was brave and kind and real. Beauty had nothing to do with it. He turned to face Vivian fully. I do not love you despite your scars. I love you, scars and all, because you are brave and kind and real, and you do not need saving, you just need someone who stays. Vivian felt tears slide down her face, warm against the damaged skin. I do not need anyone to save me, she agreed, her voice thick. I just need someone who will not run. I am not running, William said, and he kissed her, slow and certain under the fading light. Months later, Vivian's first gallery showing opened at a small community arts center. The walls were lined with her scarlight portraits. Firefighters, burn survivors, accident victims, all rendered with fierce dignity and unflinching honesty. Audrey stood beside Vivian at the opening, holding her hand, proudly telling anyone who would listen. She is really brave. William stood back, watching Vivian move through the crowd with her head high, her scars visible, her smile genuine. She was still healing. There were still hard days, but she was no longer hiding. At the end of the night, as they walked to the car together, Audrey between them, Vivian looked up at the lights strung across the gallery entrance. 3 years ago, she had run from light, believing it would only expose her shame. Now she stood in it, unafraid. William took her hand. Audrey yawned and leaned against Vivian's leg. And for the first time in a very long time, Vivian felt like she belonged. Not because someone had fixed her, but because she had learned to see herself the way William and Audrey saw her. Whole, worthy, and alive. The scars would always be there. But they were no longer a prison. They were proof she had survived. And survival, she realized, was its own kind of beautiful.